It's the Growing for Market podcast.
What I found when I was a grower was I really wished I had like a phone a friend sort of person that I could just like say, is this what I think it is? And get a second opinion, a professional opinion. And so I've tried to be that for people, like where they can text me disease lesion on a leaf and ask, is this what I think it is? And I can say yes, or let me find an expert to ask here at the university and then get that answer to them relatively quickly, because those decisions are things that you can take a leaf sample, send it into your university lab and have them test it. But that you might not get an answer for a week, 2 weeks. And at that point, especially if it's a disease lesion that you're looking to, do a preventive or quick curative spray on, that is too long. And so having that quick answer that's like 90% right is better than the 100% lab tested answer.
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing flowers and vegetables for local markets. I'm Andrew Mefford, your host and the editor of Growing for Market magazine, proudly celebrating 35 years in 2026 as the magazine by and for vegetable and flower market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. This episode is sponsored by Nifty Hoops. Nifty Hoops designs and builds high tunnel systems for growers who want dependable results. What stands out is that Nifty Hoops tunnels are complete systems designed by experienced builders with the details worked out ahead of time. That means the core components are included from the start, like end walls, ventilation, doors, baseboards, and double-layer poly, rather than being added later. The tunnels are designed for real wind and snow loads, efficient assembly, and long service life. You can choose a self-build kit with guidance from written manuals and videos, or a community build where Nifty Hoops works alongside you and the project gets completed in one day. Nifty Hoops has built more than 1,500 hoop houses across the country, including many funded through the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative. They're known nationwide for predictable outcomes and ongoing support. If you're planning a high tunnel project and want it done right, you can learn more at niftyhoops.com. If you grow for market, you know performance is everything. That's why so many farmers are turning to Burpee's Farmers Market. Dedicated to professional growers, Burpee is now offering non-GMO seeds in larger quantities, bred and selected for standout flavor, strong yields, and the kind of visual appeal your customers crave. All farmers market varieties are trialed at Burpee's Research Farm in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, where expert horticulturalists test for germination rate, vigor, disease resistance, high yield, and consistency, things that make a difference in the field and to your bottom line. The seed assortment includes USDA certified organic varieties, Burpee bred classics, heirlooms, and exciting new introductions. Burpee's been doing this for 150 years, and they're still creating new varieties with growers like you in mind. You can check out the full lineup at burpee.com/farmersmarket. That's burpee.com/farmersmarket. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Dan Fillius to the Growing for Market podcast. Dan is the statewide field specialist for commercial vegetables and specialty crops with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. Before joining Extension, Dan grew organic vegetables for 13 years, including stints managing the Michigan State University Student Organic Farm and 140 acres of vegetables at Featherstone Farm. So, without further ado, welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, Dan.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here.
It's great to be able to sit down and have a conversation because I've enjoyed your stuff on social media. Like you do these little mini interviews. I don't know if they have a name, but I've enjoyed those. And so it's fun to be able to have a little longer conversation with you.
Yeah, I don't have a fancy name for them. I've gone through a few of them, but yeah, I just call it the Tiny Mic, and it's fun to do.
The Tiny Mic conversations. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, Dan, you've got a really good article in the January Growing for Market magazine about sweet corn, which we are going to link in the show notes so people can read that. We'll also make it free. So if people aren't subscribers, anybody can go read it there, because we are here to talk about sweet corn, but I don't want to just rehash the whole article. In particular, wanted to talk about profitability, and there's a lot of issues around profitability of sweet corn. But before that, I am curious about your background. So like a lot of folks who help farmers, you have farming experience yourself. So how did you get interested in farming?
Yeah, sort of a circuitous way, I guess, but I've always been interested in like how things are made. And so that, I would say, is the kernel, the seed within me that like made that happen. But so I was a teacher and I would knit. And so one summer, I had the summer off and I decided I would like to learn how yarn is made, this yarn that I am knitting with. And so I found a fiber farm in Pennsylvania that I could get an apprenticeship at. And so I spent the summer at this fiber farm that raised Angora goats and Jacob sheep, and as well as they had some milking goats that we would milk. But anyway, we learned about, raising the animals, shearing them, taking that raw product and turning it into yarn. And so that was a lot of fun. But that farm happened to be just down the road from Ann and Eric Nordell's farm. And so I would go to their farm because we would exchange milk for veggies. And when I was there, this light bulb went off and I thought, man, vegetables. Yes, I think I've gotten enough, my fill of how fiber works. And that's fun to know. But really, if I could see myself doing this seems like really good work. So went back to being a teacher, had a garden, was growing very poorly, did not have any skills whatsoever to grow vegetables. And at that time also is the year that like Omnivore's Dilemma and like Animal Vegetable Miracle came out. And I read those and I was like, yes, yes, give me the Kool-Aid. And I was inspired to change careers. And a later summer, I was like, okay, is there a farm school that could teach me vegetable growing out there? And there is a place there was at least, I haven't kept track in Massachusetts if the farm school, quote unquote, is still around. But I found a place in Wisconsin, Michael Field's Agricultural Institute, where I could go for a summer because the other ones were like a whole year and I was a teacher and just had the summer. So I wanted to learn like basics. And so I went there and it was fantastic. I learned a lot and loved that program and was fabulously overconfident. And directly out of there, I was like, yes, I'm going to switch careers. And I applied for a farm manager position after one summer of learning how to grow vegetables. Oh my goodness. I'm embarrassed to say that. But so I applied for this farm manager job and thankfully I didn't get it. But they offered me the intern position and I graciously accepted that. And this was at Glenwood out in the Hudson Valley. And I had a great mentor, Dave Llewellyn. He showed me the ropes. And that really confirmed that was the profession that I'd been looking for. And that's maybe a little bit long there, but that's how I got into farming.
Yeah, no, that's fun to hear. And it's so cool that you have a connection to the Nordells because we originally started our farm on some family land in Pennsylvania that was, gosh, I can't remember, not that far away from the Nordells because we knew them a little bit. And so we would go see them sometimes when they had field days and stuff like that. Like it was close enough that we could just leave our farm and go over for the day and look at whatever cool stuff they were doing. So that's a great entry point into farming.
Yeah. Right? Oh my goodness. Yeah. At the time I was like, I'm going to do it all with horses and it's going to be pure and this is the way.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Actually, yeah, we got interested in horse farming. In fact, we worked on a farm here in Maine the year before we started the farm where we are now called Horsepower Farm, which I think they still do have horses, even though Paul Birdsall, who we worked for, has since passed away. But that was a great learning experience. But we already had a tractor from the farm that we started in Pennsylvania. And in the end, the convenience of the tractor just won out. So
Yeah. Well, I remember them, like, one other thing that they had was they had this, like, pig barn. And it was their horse barn. And they had the stalls that the horses were in, manure would build up. And then they would muck it over into like one deeper pile in a stall. And they'd run the pigs in there and they'd like shove a stick down in the manure and they'd put corn down at the bottom. And then the pigs would get in there and they'd root around to get to the corn. And that would like turn the manure like a compost pile. And then they also had a little like catwalk sort of thing that allowed chickens in there, which would scratch around and eat parasites and worms and stuff like that. And the catwalk allowed the chickens to like flutter up and like get out of the way of the pigs as they were in there. So all these things for a young idealist person, coming to see a farm system, like that was the light bulb right there. Also, I just thought, yes, they're doing it. This makes so much sense.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean with the pig turned compost, and that was one of. They had a lot of cool systems going on. In fact, they've got a few articles. I mean, they have a lot of stuff out in the world. They also have a few articles. So if people want to look in the Growing for Market magazine archives, they've had some articles in there over the years. They're great farmers. So I was also interested to see in your background that you worked at Featherstone Farm in Minnesota, because just back in August 2025, we had Jack Hedin and Abby Benson from Featherstone Farm on the pod, which I loved that episode because it's just sounds like a really excellent and well-run farm. And also like the scale that they were doing it, I think they're similar scale, like over 140 acres or something like that, which is a lot of vegetables, but they seem to have really high quality standards and like care about how they were treating their workers and the whole 9 yards. So I was really impressed with that interview, and people can go listen to that in the podcast archives if they want to hear more about Featherstone Farm. So sounds like you got the experience over time, because did you then go from Featherstone to the Michigan State University organic farm?
Vice versa. So I worked on a few farms before getting the field production manager job at Michigan State Student Organic Farm. And then my wife's from Iowa, all of her family's here, and we wanted to be closer to them. And so Michigan State was like a 10-hour drive from there. And so we found Featherstone in southern Minnesota and moved there. And I was the production coordinator there for several seasons and worked with Abby and Jack there. And in 2018, we were like, this is close, but it's still not close enough to Iowa. And so we moved down here. My wife got another job, and I was thinking I was going to start an urban farm in Des Moines, but a position with extension was opened up and was posted, and I applied for it and got it, and was, figured it would be something to help me, help pay the bills while I was starting up this urban farm. But eventually I just found that I loved working for extension. And so here I am.
Well, that's cool, because I know a lot of really excellent extension agents who just have a lot to offer and do a lot to help farmers. And, obviously there's a lot of need. I feel like this is a particularly timely interview because in the current February magazine, we have an article titled How to Work with Extension Agents and Other Folks Who Help Farmers. And I know it may differ by state, province, or region, but I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about what kind of work you do to support growers and how growers can access the resources offered by Extension there in Iowa.
Yeah, sure. I can speak to like my situation here in Iowa. It is, like you say, different everywhere. And for instance, here in Iowa, within horticulture extension, this may come as a surprise to listeners, but corn and beans are the big crops in Iowa, and there's not that much vegetable production. Therefore, I am the main, the commercial vegetable field specialist, and I cover the whole state.
You're the guy.
I'm the guy. And so people from other places will be like, oh, so who's the county extension agent for vegetables that I go to? And would that it could be that way. But anyway, it's not. That is maybe selling it a little short. We do have people in some counties in extension who do have a very good background in vegetables and horticulture. But for commercial vegetables, it's mostly me. And one step back, from Des Moines to the different corners of the state of Iowa, it is 3 to 4 hours. And so I can't get there very easily to make a house call to a grower. So I've tried to really build out the distance support that I am offering, but I am always willing. I do have a travel allowance that allows me to go and visit farms that are distant. So that I'm not saying that I won't ever go there. I try to get to each corner at least, once or twice a year. But largely, I've given my cell phone number out and people can call and text me. Texting is really helpful. Farmers know mostly how to grow the crops well already. And what I found when I was a grower was I really wished I had a phone a friend sort of person that I could just like say, is this what I think it is? And like get a second opinion, a professional opinion. And so I've tried to be that for people, like where they can text me disease lesion on a leaf and ask, is this what I think it is? And I can say yes, or let me find an expert to ask here at the university, and then get that answer to them relatively quickly, because those decisions are things that you can take a leaf sample, send it into your university lab, and have them test it. But that you might not get an answer for a week, 2 weeks. And at that point, especially if it's a disease lesion that you're looking to, do a preventive or quick curative spray on, that is too long. And so having that quick answer that's like 90% right is better than the 100% lab tested answer. And so I shouldn't say better, but sometimes more is definitely more actionable. And a lot of, say, disease lesions end up being like a similar treatment anyway. But you should not take that, dear listener, as an endorsement of spraying whatever. It is good to know what the quote unquote enemy is before acting. So anyway, call and text is a big way. And if we can't figure it out through that method, then I will make a farm visit to that grower. And when I get that information, whether it's through the call and text or from the farm visit, it's helpful if it's likely that other farmers in the state are experiencing similar things. And I like to get that word spread. And so I use, as much as I can, Instagram stories to capture things in the moment and say, hey, everybody who's a follower in the region, this is what I saw in this area. If you are seeing something similar, maybe it's this. And I've heard good feedback about growers who enjoy seeing that, so that they can, because a lot of people are wondering the same thing but aren't reaching out to ask the same question. But additionally, I recognize that, or a big limitation of that method is that not everybody's on Instagram. So I've got it linked to Facebook. And so any story I put on Instagram is also on Facebook. So that captures that demographic. But that is also limiting, it's not available to everybody who's not on either of those platforms. So I decided that I would also try to get all that information out in other formats. So I have a weekly podcast for Iowa growers where we cover, it's me and a couple weather folks, our state climatologist, and we have an extension ag climatologist. They give a weekly update on what weather impacts have been and what the forecast is for the next week and the long-term climate forecast. And then I cover things that I've seen on farms. And then we have show notes that show pictures of what people have seen. That gets posted to the website. And then I copy that web article and send it out in an email newsletter to a listserv that I administer for commercial vegetable growers. So I'm trying to get the same information out in like as many different formats as possible, because it is very segmented, how we get our information. And I want to be sure that I'm not missing anybody. And the one place that I'm mostly missing at this point, and which is not going to affect anybody likely listening to this podcast, but the Amish I work with quite a bit here in the state, and they are left out of all of those ways. So it is a goal of mine to have a quarterly digest version of what I'm seeing that is not the real-time actionable thing, but more like this retrospective, if you see this again, and things to think about for the next year and future years, that I print out on paper and send to their snail mail addresses.
Well, that's great of you to cover all those bases. I love that as an agricultural phone a friend, because I know what you mean. There are these times when, say you see a bug for the first time or something, and you're like, I know somebody knows what this is. I just need 2 minutes of the right person's time to look at this and say, oh, it's this. And partially, I think through doing this podcast, I've really realized the value of talking to people who talk to a lot of other farmers, right? Like yourself, because I realize that people, extension agents and consultants and people who travel around or travel virtually and talk to people, can tell us if something going on, like you said, is it a trend? Or is it just this is out of the blue? Because obviously, especially beginning growers need extra help. But, the weather's changing, diseases and pests are changing along with that. Even experienced growers, I think, can sometimes run into an issue that they never have before. And so it's but even if it's new to you, somebody knows, and I feel like, there's not that many, there's farmers anymore. Only a fraction of the people who are farming are doing market farming like we do. And so that's a great service that you're able to provide. And it's great that you try to distribute it so thoroughly.
Yeah.
And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. Most CSAs don't lose members on price. They lose them because their systems break. In a recent 70-minute panel, 3 veteran CSA operators serving hundreds to thousands of members break down production planning, fulfillment, retention, and what they'd change for 2026. They talk honestly about what fails when you scale, how they protect member trust, and what actually drives renewals. Download the full conversation at farmhand.partners/GFM and see how the fastest growing farms are building smarter businesses. That's farmhand.partners/GFM. This episode is brought to you by Tend, the all-in-one AI-powered farm management platform trusted by modern growers. Whether you're growing vegetables, flowers, or fruit, or managing a nursery, greenhouse, or vineyard, you know how much time gets lost in planning, tracking, and staying organized. Tend helps you cut through the busy work so you can focus on growing and selling what matters. With Tend, you can plan your crops, assign and track tasks, manage inventory, and handle your sales and accounting all in one smart, easy-to-use platform. Whether you run a 1-acre farm or manage a large operation, Tend adapts to your scale and style, supporting everything from manual labor to fully mechanized workflows. Try it for free at tend.com. No credit card required. That's TEND.com. Streamline your season and grow with confidence. And now, back to the show.
Can I say one more thing that I'm like a new thing that I'm going to try to do? So I'm still realizing that there are people that are missing the information that is out there. So something that I have not yet done that I'm trying to do is get all of my reels from Instagram on YouTube as shorts, because YouTube has a much broader reach. And so we have a YouTube account, ISU Commercial Horticulture, and putting videos on there and shorts that are the reels that I've been making. And then starting this year, me and our fruit field specialist are going to do a monthly Q&A on Zoom that any grower can come in to and ask questions and answers, and get answers directly from us once a month as a call-in show, basically, and for commercial growers. And then we're going to record that and then later post that on YouTube so that it's available for anybody who wasn't able to be there. So just trying to get it in as many platforms as possible so that people can get the answers they need.
Yeah, well, that's great to try to make it available as possible. Well, and another thing I probably should mention that I think is relevant here is that you have an article in the current February Growing for Market magazine, which is partially write-ups of the first season of your podcast called Pivot Points. And the reason I just thought of that is because some of the people, I guess, to summarize the article, you excerpted interviews that you did for the podcast with people who had big changes going on in their farm, things that may have spelled the end of the road for their farm or had a big change that made them really change their farm. And I can't remember if anybody that you interviewed went into extension, but I think it's worth pointing out that people get to that point of not being sure that they want to continue farming. It doesn't necessarily have to be the end of their farming journey. There's so many people who help support farmers, from for-profit companies, various nonprofits and extension and things like that, that I hope people can read that article and think about how even if they have to stop farming for whatever reason, they can still be a part of that. They can still use all the things that they've learned as a farmer to help other farmers. Because I think farmers are very proud of their profession, and like a lot of farmers I feel like that I've talked to who are trying to make the decision out, it's almost more an emotional decision of like 100%. It's tied up in their identity. And I just wanted to say I thought your article was really great for showing that people don't have to completely abandon the farm scene, if that's the way to put it, even if they have to stop farming. There's other ways that they can help their other farmers, even if their farm business is coming to an end.
Yes, that is a big theme in the whole season of Pivot Points, season 1, this grappling with this emotional decision. And am I a failure because I am leaving farming. And, it's the only, one of our guests, Ariel Pressman, said, this is the only profession where the only way you can be a success is if you make 100% of your money from the farm, and then you suffer a fair bit, and then you die on the farm. And you can't. And it's such a high bar that we set for ourselves, and is not something that any other business asks for or people in other businesses expect. And we should give ourselves more grace. And yes, there are people that we talk to your original point about, are there people we talk to who have transitioned into extension? Not anybody directly into extension per se, but there are people who we talk to, like Ariel, who is now, his business that he has started is helping beginning farmers, hit the ground running. And then Ellen Polishuk, who we interviewed in the same episode, who is helping experienced farmers grapple with transitions and decisions. And I know Ellen's written articles for Growing for Market also.
Yeah, Ellen's great.
Yeah, and Adam Montry, who has also written at least one article for Growing for Market, was formerly with Michigan State Extension, where I knew him from. And when he ended his farming career, or transitioned really into working for USDA.
Yeah, so that's it. If people keep in mind, if the farm is coming to an end, you could be an agricultural phone a friend. So
yeah, exactly. And I should say, I guess I neglected to say the name of the Iowa specific podcast that I do, and that is called What in the Weather. So we were just talking about my podcast Pivot Points that I do with Sarah Jane Zugritz of UW, but the other one, if you're an Iowa grower and want to hear about Iowa weather and Iowa goings on, it is What in the Weather.
Okay, there you go. Okay, let's get down to our main topic, being sweet corn. So you wrote a great article in the January magazine about sweet corn, which is public in the show notes, which I wanted to do just so we don't have to rehash the whole thing. I want to talk about some different things, but I also want all the great information in that article to be available to everyone, so people can either find it in the show notes or just go to the website, growingformarket.com, and search sweet corn, and it'll be there for you. So the emphasis in your article is on getting the earliest sweet corn possible without chemicals. And there are a couple angles relating to that article that I thought might be better suited to the podcast. And foremost in my mind is profitability. People love sweet corn, but I think it can be hard for growers to make money on. Now, I'm guessing the economics of sweet corn are more favorable in Iowa, where you are, than in Maine, where I am. But do you have a sense of whether growers around you are making money on sweet corn or not?
Yes, some of them are. Not everybody is, but there are some growers certainly who are making money on this. And I know some growers here in Iowa are field corn growers who are just growing a little bit on the side. It's the same equipment. And they'll, in many cases, I've heard of this happening where that enterprise on the farm is one that is turned over to the kids, who are young kids, and they run the sweet corn stand, and then that ends up being their like college nest egg. So that doesn't 100% answer your question of is it profitable. But I think that yes, the Iowa landscape is way more favorable for it than Maine, because I'll step back one sec. You were talking about those reels that I posted on Instagram from growers at the Organic Veg Production Conference when we were doing our conversation beforehand. And so, yeah, I posted these reels on Instagram asking growers at the Organic Veg Production Conference in Madison last weekend about what was their most profitable and least profitable crop. And funny enough, I heard growers share in both that sweet corn was on that list. So some growers said sweet corn was the least profitable crop, and one grower said sweet corn was in the most profitable crop for them. And the difference between them seems to be the scale of farm, which ties directly into mechanization, but then also somewhat land access. These are all three things very tightly like woven together. And it seems like for scale, let's look at that one first, that those who are on a larger scale, they've invested in tools and systems that can be shared by multiple crops that then make a difference in the efficiency on those crops. And as I said, these are all tightly woven together. So we'll segue over into land access. Like corn takes up a lot of space. And so people who have a lot of land and therefore are able to be at a large scale have the ability to spread out and into more land because sure, per square foot, corn is not going to be making as much money as, say, baby leaf salad greens or microgreens, which were many more people said were the most profitable crops, or head lettuce that you can like John Jevons and squeeze together in a French intensive way. But anyway, corn spreads out. And so here in Iowa, where people are very spread out and growing thousands of acres of corn, they can just squeeze in some sweet corn on the side. And relatively speaking, it's a very small part of it, but it's 4 acres or something like that, which is bigger than many entire vegetable farms. But there are people who are not corn growers here who are also just growing sweet corn. So I don't know. And another interesting advantage for Iowa is that a lot of field corn seed sellers, vendors, will sometimes gift, say, 4 rows worth of seed, of sweet corn seed, as like a signing bonus or something. Get this field corn seed and I'll give you this bag of sweet corn. So it's like the family, you can have it just for the family to put up in the freezer or something. And the seed is free on that. So there's some other little interesting idiosyncrasies there. But I think for the diversified veggie grower, who is the majority of what I assume is going to be listening to this, if you've got a lot of land, you might find that sweet corn is a lucrative crop to spread out with. And you might also consider, if you do have the equipment and the space for this, like, can you sell it to other farms that are smaller for whom it isn't efficient because they're focusing on the very intensive growing? Because like mechanization, we haven't touched on that yet, but if you've the tools with which it seems like make this make sense are like a large enough tractor that can pull field tillage equipment that's large enough to do a significant amount of field work quickly, and cultivation equipment also that can work down weeds in that either before planting and then also soon after and during crop establishment on a large scale quickly. And then many people that are making this work have a planter that's going to plant it at efficiently and singulate seed. And here in Iowa, at least, and I presume much of the Corn Belt, people have 4-row equipment that is just in the fence row. That is good equipment, from the 80s and 90s, like John Deere 7000 or 7200 planter, 4-row of this. It's like a finger pickup or vacuum style plate planter that is just, you can get for not a lot of money, and it's a good planter, and you can plant the corn so that it's just one plant every 8 or 9 inches. Get that, dial in your population 25,000-ish per acre. Or if you're a diversified vegetable grower who is invested in a higher quality seeder, like I imagine, I don't know if a Wizard would do it. I don't work with enough people who have a Wizard, but I know a Matermac could do this. A Jang seeder has issues sometimes with larger seeds. But an Earthway is not bad, but it's not great for singulation. And especially with super sweets, which are much more variable in the size of seed. And so you might get a lot more doubles with super sweets. A couple other things, like with that tractor, if you've got small tractors, don't always have a large bucket loader or capacity that you can use that bucket loader for harvest. Some people do. Other people are larger scale and have a harvest conveyor that they use for other crops. That could be used on sweet corn as well. And then the next level up is getting a pick-saw like harvester implement that is going to pick all that corn for you. Now, harvesters don't get rid of all the picking labor. They just transfer it over to the sorting line, making sure that quality control is being done after the fact rather than in the field when you're actually picking the thing. So that's not getting rid of all the labor necessarily.
Is that because the pick saw is pulling off ears that are too small and or leaving pieces of stalk on? It sounds
exactly.
It's delivering material that still needs to be graded by a human to another place. Okay.
Just like a green bean picker, there's going to be shanks on the sweet corn or like stems attached to the green beans, or it's going to get the bad and the good. And so, you just got to sort those. And some people have established a sorting line on the implement, like pulling a trailer sort of that has the bin so it doesn't actually go in the bin, but other people do it in the shed.
Okay, well, yeah, that all makes sense. And maybe it's worthwhile just taking a second to talk about the challenges to profitability, because hearing you talk about the scale, it definitely does seem like with a space intensive crop like sweet corn, it would help to have a lot of space to grow it on, right? Because I'm thinking here, you tell me, I might miss something, but like the barriers to profitability on sweet corn would be it takes up a relative lot of space, right? It's a big plant, which in most cases you're just getting one ear off of. In the article you talk about, particularly the early varieties only make one ear that's going to size up fully. Maybe the later varieties might have two, but it's not a sure thing. So you're mostly thinking one seed, one plant, one ear, takes up a lot of space, and then people don't want to pay a ton of money for it. Like everybody loves it, but I feel there's price sensitivity there. And then especially the scale, I'm thinking like, you're talking about, somebody growing 4 acres of sweet corn and having the equipment to deal with plant, cultivate, harvest mechanically. Obviously you have to be at a certain scale. Like you're not going to invest in that kind of equipment for a 1/4 acre unless it's doing something on another part of your farm.
Right. Or would you even invest in it for 4 acres of just sweet corn? I think you got to have more than just that crop to really make that work, which is why when I'm talking about a bucket loader, some of these growers are not investing in any more fancy harvest setups than they take the bucket loader, they get 4 people picking, in 4 rows. They drive down, straddling the 2 middle rows, and they've got their bucket and at like chest height or hip height, and they're just plowing down that corn. The pickers are just ahead of them, and they pick the corn, then they come back and put it in the bucket, and then they go down to the end, and then at the end of the row you dump the bucket into a trailer, and that trailer then goes to the roadside stand later on that morning. And that works. It doesn't need to be any more fancy than that. And that also works because of what you said or what you had quoted me on, which is that most of these plants are making one ear. Like there is a second ear usually, but it's usually short, it's small, it's not the same standard as people expect. And I don't know if I'm not convinced necessarily that there's an overall difference between first planting, later plantings. Some people do swear by getting, 3, 4 ears even from some plants, but most growers that I'm working with are just going for that one pick, because especially if you're driving down there with the tractor and flattening these plants, the next pick, if you were to try to go in and salvage that second ear, the plant is going to it will rebound, and like similar to lodging, it'll start growing up again, but it's going to be much harder to find that ear, and you'll have to stoop more. And so yes, you might get more sales per acre, but the labor costs really skyrocket with that second pick. So the key to profitability, I think, there is really just counting on that first planting. If you're just going to focus on that. If you're looking, though, if you're trying to do it small scale, and you're just going through without mowing it down, say you've got people with apple harvesting, like bibs, or what are those things called?
Well, that's what I called them. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, like later on, I wanted to ask you like about harvest aids. That's what I think I called them. The bags with where the bottom's open and you can release.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Like you might, if you're a small scale grower, increase your profitability by getting, especially if you're a direct market, say CSA grower, and there's more forgiveness from the customer base because it's not at the grocery store, where they're looking at it compared to this platonic ideal of sweet corn, but it's still a good ear of corn. And the second ear, it just might be a little smaller, a little shorter. I think that can really increase your take home from that same unit of space. And yeah, every corn plant is likely going to give you 2 ears, and just understand that the second one's going to be smaller.
Yeah, that's good. One other thing that I was just thinking about is the pests. I was thinking I'm assuming if somebody has acres of sweet corn, they're just letting critters come in and eat whatever they want. But if you have even, I want to say like a 1/4 acre of sweet corn, I'm trying to think of, what's a quantity that a small market farmer might have. Well, you're probably aware, raccoons, deer, and I've found porcupines. I mean, everything loves sweet corn, right? So I found porcupines in our sweet corn, right? So
yeah. Beavers here also are one that's sort of like they come in off the river and they chew off the whole plant and drag it back to their lodge. Yeah.
Now I've got this image of a beaver dam out in Iowa somewhere, completely made out of corn stalks. I never.
I'd love to see that picture. I agree. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Okay. We'll keep an eye on your social media feed for that one, Dan. But
okay.
So that's another thought. It's so frustrating because, as you point out in your article, it's like 2 or 3 days. They're so on time. It's like 2 or 3 days before you would start picking the sweet corn that the raccoons and deer and porcupines and beavers and everything else start showing up. And so, of course, in the article, you do talk about fencing. We have had luck with that. I'll direct people to the article if they want to see how to fence critters like that out. But yeah, I mean, the pest pressure on sweet corn is intense. And I feel like, that can be it's so frustrating to get a crop 2 to 3 days from the point where you're going to start picking it and then start having it taken apart. So I guess what I should say is have a plan for those pests, because a small patch of sweet corn, they can take out a lot, because at least in my experience, they're messy eaters, right? They'll go in and like take a few bites out of an ear and then move on to another ear. It's not like they're eating 2 whole ears and then leaving. It's like they're doing a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's like it's like the 80-20 rule. They eat like 20% of 80% of the crop.
They must be getting the best 20% out of each, like find the best kernels. I don't know how they choose, but yeah, incredibly destructive. So that is I was thinking like that's another disadvantage that smaller scale growers are at, is that pests can do a lot of damage if you don't have a big sweet corn patch. And so I guess it's just have a plan. Know you're going to have to fence them out. If you don't have a huge sweet corn patch, you're going to have to keep the critters out some way.
Yes. And one thing I talked about raccoons and deer, and I talked about worms in the article. But one thing I didn't mention was birds, and they are very destructive as well. They can get into the tips and just shred the tips of most of the ears. Similar timing, and that is so frustrating. And the ways that I've seen people scare birds away are either with a propane-powered like bird cannon, but that's can be a nuisance to neighbors. Good news is that the birds aren't always there. I see it, in certain times of the year. Here it seems to be early, and also there can be, scare tape. Does that work? I don't know if it really works that well. But also these like used car sales, dancing like inflated guys. I think the bird cannons are the ones that I've heard the most people having the most success with on that. And crows get a bad rap, and I'm a bird watcher, and I have almost never seen actual crows out there, but I do see blackbirds, smaller blackbirds like brown-headed cowbirds or brewer's blackbird or red-winged blackbird out there getting the tips. And are they going for the sugary corn itself, or are they going for the worm that's in the tip? I think both.
I was going to ask. Actually, we had a podcast guest who was a falconer who would contract out. I guess she was more doing like vineyards out in Oregon and stuff like that. But if farmers had a latent interest in falconry, they could also get a bird.
Yes, because we all need one more enterprise, right?
Right.
No, but it's like transitions. Back to pivot points.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll keep it reasonable. So in light of all this talk about profitability, I have heard some people talk about sweet corn as a loss leader, as far as something that draws people into the stand, hoping customers will buy a few other things that are more profitable while they're there. They're like, come for the sweet corn, stay for the salad mix kind of thing. Do you know if anyone you know is doing that as far as treating sweet corn like a loss leader? And whether you do or not, do you think that's a sound strategy to treat it like a loss leader?
Yes, I do know people who are treating it as a loss leader, because here in Iowa, it's number one. Like if you don't have sweet corn, people are not gonna they're gonna look elsewhere first. And so having sweet corn, whether you grew it or whether you bought it from a farmer that you're friends with, yeah, you get it. And I guess tomatoes maybe actually is tied up there with number one. People look a lot for tomatoes, but you got to have customers first. And so where the culture is that sweet corn is the exciting thing, I think you have to have it in order to bring the customer in. Unfortunately, I don't know if I can really answer the second part of your question, which is like whether the whole loss leader philosophy is sound. I mean, I know that it's something that the grocery industry seems to do quite a bit, and I know the margins aren't great there, but it seems like people who have thought things through more thoroughly than I have are doing it. And so maybe that's the only evidence I have to emulate it, but I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a sound idea. of bringing people in with one product, even if it's marginally profitable. I mean, mentioning grocery stores, my understanding, I've always been told that produce is kind of like that for grocery stores. Like the produce is a loss leader for a lot of grocery stores, and that their profit margin is very thin, but they're hoping that you need all that stuff, and so that you'll come and buy some produce and then buy some ultra processed food that has a good profit margin in it. It comes out in the wash.
Or like restaurants where it's the booze, right?
Right. Yeah. You gotta have something you're making money on, right?
Yeah. I mean, the booze being the profit maker, not the loss leader.
Good clarification there. I just want to encourage people to make sure that it really is paying off, if they're treating it as a loss leader.
Yes. And I would like a lot of growers, maybe, I don't know if we've really addressed this head on, but I'll just say it right now in case we haven't, and in case anybody is still thinking like they need to grow sweet corn. Like, you don't have to grow everything. And a lot of growers feel like another one of these unspoken rules, you have to work entirely on the farm. You have to die on the farm to be a success. And another one is that we examined is you have to grow every single thing yourself. And if you don't grow every single thing yourself, you are dishonest and you are a bad farmer. I don't believe that at all. And I see a lot of good partnerships between farmers where somebody who really enjoys and has the equipment to grow a certain crop profitably and well will grow that crop and then sell it or trade it with another grower in exchange for something else that they don't grow as well. And so a farming endeavor that I did that I didn't mention earlier, like after I moved to Iowa, I helped start up a small farm that here in just south of Des Moines, where we had a roadside stand. And I was growing organically, and it was difficult to grow early sweet corn organically. So that first 4th of July corn, I wanted it for a roadside stand to bring people in. I bought it from a neighbor who was really well equipped to do that. And that got people coming to our stand, and they kept buying sweet corn later that we produced. But we just clearly stated, this is from this sweet corn grower, not ours. Ours will be dropping on this date, and you don't need to grow it yourself. And if we had grown it ourselves that early, it would have certainly been underwater on that sweet corn. But by buying it in, we actually made money on that stuff. And so there are different ways to make sweet corn work for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because obviously, if people are producer-only markets, obviously they got to grow everything themselves. But if you're not at a producer-only market, then I think I actually, just over the last few months, I feel like I've talked to there have been a lot of podcast guests who either have farm stores or buy stuff in for their CSA, like things that they're in the wrong climate to grow, but the county over has a better climate, or just the grower from the county over has better machinery to grow it. And so, yeah, like you said, as long as people are being honest about what they grew and didn't grow, I think there's no shame in teaming up with other growers. So, because diversity of cropping is great, but it's also, we can't all be good at everything. And so, yeah, we might as well just cooperate as farmers and stick to the things that we're good at. So, and I did want to say, I mean, sweet corn is still a big deal here in Maine. Everything that you said in your article, I know of farmers around here doing it. They're just doing it a lot later, as far as, I'll direct people to the article for that, but there's, all kinds of ways to get earlier sweet corn. And so, I chuckle in your article, you're talking about having sweet corn by July 4th. I'm like, obviously,
if only.
Yeah, obviously not happening in Maine, but people here are doing all the things you talk about in your article. They're just doing it. They're to be as early as possible here. So
yes.
I think your article is a good guide to that.
Can I ask, here bicolor is the norm, but I've heard that in other locations, like I think New Jersey, like white was the standard for the longest time. What is the norm on color of kernels in Maine?
It seems like bicolor is the standard. Yeah, that sounded true to me. I always assumed that one thing about that is that since field corn is sort of traditionally yellow, I figured bicolor was one way to set it apart, right? So it has a different look. Kind of like, I don't know, it's like we worked for a farm that did a lot of eggs, and we actually used to have quite a few certified organic laying hens. And the farmer that we really learned about poultry from said, just like, if you're doing organic eggs, which we were and they were, they said, get brown. Like, people just expect organic eggs to be brown. Yeah. And so we usually got brown. Actually, sometimes we had the mixed, we would get chickens that we would either have all brown
Easter
or
eggers.
mixed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's like People buy with their eyes. You gotta give people what they're expecting. So, but yeah, I would say around here, I mean, I guess white is still different. And like you mentioned that Silver Queen, which Silver Queen's like the old OP.
Old.
Yeah.
Yep.
So nobody's really using that anymore. So whatever the case is, it seems like most of sweet corn around here is also bicolor. And that was always my theory, is that it was to set it apart from field corn, but I could be wrong about that. Actually, speaking of early sweet corn, in the article, you talk about how early sweet corn isn't just a bragging right, but those early years command a market premium. And we all know if we can get people coming to our market stand early in the season, it can lead to repeat business. But as a heat-loving crop, having the earliest sweet corn usually involves planting it in some weather that it doesn't want to grow in. Or like you say in the article, like farmers will plant the first warm stretch, and we know that usually the first nice warm day is also followed by some colder weather. So conventional growers have used treated seed to overcome cold soils, which are off limits to organic growers. But I know they've been making progress on organic seed treatments, which you do talk about in the article, but I want to ask a little bit more about that, because I realize the treatments themselves are probably proprietary, but do you know how they work and what's in them? The certifiable organic seed treatments? I'm not sure what to call them, but the non-conventional seed treatments. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. This is not my area of expertise, but as I understand it, a major one that is used that I see on some seeds in Johnny's catalog, for example, is Organic 1R. And Organic 1R is, as I understand it, a humic acid-based treatment that goes on the seed, and it's designed to improve like early stage development, nutrient uptake, root growth, and it helps to protect against stresses rather than actually like killing insects or diseases that are going after it. It's improving strength of that young plant. And then another one, there are other ones out there that are more mycorrhizal fungi based with different beneficial microbes on there also potentially that also are in that sense trying to strengthen that little plant rather than kill other things that are coming after it. So those are the two areas that I know of at the moment for seed treatments for organic crops. But the whole like biostimulant game is really like, it seems like it's growing a lot right now, and the industry that is, and I'm sure there are other things that I've just missed by only focusing on those two, but in the trial that I did, those are the two that I was looking at, was humic acid ones and mycorrhizal fungi based ones. The two we used were Organic 1R and then AEA's BioCoat Gold.
Okay, that's why I wanted to ask, because I did get a sense there's a lot going on with those. The conventional seed treatments are very established, and so I got the feeling they're trying to make the organic ones better, because, right? I mean, you said in the article that the organic ones aren't as effective as far as cold soil emergence for sweet corn as the conventional ones.
Yeah, thank you for bringing me back to that, because I'm sure listeners are going to want to know, like, okay, but are they as good? And no, they aren't. Like, they don't do the same thing. So the soil temperature at which we had good success with conventional seed treatment was planting in early April here at soil temperature, those first warm stretch of like 75 to 80 degree days where the soil temperature warmed up to 55. And then like planting happened, and then we got those cold days and the soil temperature crashed to, low 40s. And those seeds just hung out there for a few weeks and then like took off when it warmed up again. The organic seed treatments ended up, we only had 45 to 50% germination on that from those same planting dates, while the conventional ones had somewhere between 80 and 90% germination. But we did end up, there was a time at which that those organic seed treatments did start to do better. And that unfortunately coincided with when our planter had something got crossed up in the planter, and we ended up not having varieties separated anymore. And so my whole third planting was a mess, and the data was no good. So it's the next round that I do is going to be expanding that organic seed treatment trial to find out exactly what is the soil temperature at which those things do better than raw seed.
Okay, so stay tuned, folks.
Yes. And my apologies.
And maybe it's worth mentioning just really quickly that I want you to verify this for me, but that the mode of action on the conventional seed treatments is right. It's typically a fungicide and an insecticide, so that if the seed sits in cold soil, it won't rot because of the fungicide. And then there's lots of things like seed corn maggot is one you talk about. There's lots of things that would love to eat that seed while it's sitting in the ground. And so the insecticide just kills the thing before it has a chance to eat it or something like that. So
yes, exactly. Yeah, it's like the insecticide is good for like a few weeks, and then it's not carrying on and killing off the like earworm later on, when that plant's way much bigger. It is that protecting it through the germination stage.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out, and I think a lot of the GFM readers and listeners that I've talked to are either certified organic or, organic but uncertified, so they may not have used those. So I just wanted to point out that the mode of action is totally different in the organic versus the conventional seed treatments. And I don't know that we'll ever get organic seed treatments with that same kind of action.
I doubt it, mainly because of the longevity, it seems like, of these, a lot of organic biopesticides, or bio-based pesticides, like these things are designed to not be persistent, and to expect that to sit around in the soil for 3 weeks, I just don't think it aligns with how organic pesticides are, seemingly. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so people can watch, it's obviously something they're working on. They'll probably get better over time, but at this, certainly at this point, it may never be as effective as the conventional treatments, but the organic ones may give an advantage, especially as they improve them over time for cold soil emergence. Okay. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Rimmel greenhouses are proudly built right here in America and shipped to anywhere in the U.S. With technical sales staff members located across the country, many with growing experience, the Rimmel Greenhouse's team of experts will serve as your trusted partner every step of the way to ensure that you get exceptional value from your greenhouse investment. Visit Rimmel.com to get a quote today. Today's episode of the Growing for Market podcast is brought to you by BCS America. On our farm, we've had our BCS two-wheel tractor for over a decade, and with no belts to slip, its all-gear-driven construction is still going strong. Though we originally got it for rototilling, we kept it even when we went mostly no-till because it can do so many other things around the farm. From snow blowing, to making raised beds with the rotary plow, to chipping wood, it can do just about anything you might need on a farm with the right attachment. Need to shred a cover crop? A BCS flail mower will make quick work of even the most vigorous cover crop and chop it up so it breaks down quickly. Want to stir in compost or amendments without inverting soil layers? A power harrow turns your BCS into a precise tilthing machine with depth control so you don't mix deeper than you want to. With so many attachments to choose from, it truly is the Swiss Army knife of farm implements. It's why, instead of saying two-wheel tractor, so many people just say BCS. Tractors and attachments are on sale through the end of the year. Visit bcsamerica.com to find sale pricing and your nearest dealer. And now, back to the show. As far as types of sweet corn go, growers will know there are several distinct different types of sweet corn, and we don't have to talk about all of them because it's my understanding hardly anyone is planting the original SU sweet corn commercially. But you make an interesting comment in the article about younger customers preferring the SH2 super sweets and older customers preferring SE or sugary enhanced varieties. And why is that?
That's a great question. I don't know entirely the psychology of it, but there's a couple things. One, like the growers here in Iowa, at least, the older growers planted SH2s when they first came on the market, and they put a bad taste in their mouth. No pun intended. The taste was supposedly great, but the texture was very crunchy, and it was not a pleasant eating experience for them. So they sort of associated SH2 with that, and they decided that they would grow SE as much as possible. Now, SH2 has the good advantage for the wholesale grower because it holds the sweetness much longer. It doesn't convert to starch as quickly. So it can, 7 to 10 days after picking still be as sweet as almost as sweet as when it was picked. So if it's kept cold, for sure. And so those growers did, who wanted the SE, who liked eating the SE, would begrudgingly grow SH2 for the shipping market. But a lot of breeding has really gone into that since then. And the SH2s are no longer that crunchy texture. They're very pleasant and creamy, like people expect from SEs. And so that is old information, that quality. So, but that could be why those growers, the growers that is, preferred that, because they had a bad experience when they were planting it a while ago. Another idea I have is just like, younger customers have been getting more of their food from grocery stores proportionally, including produce, than older customers. And because of that, they have been buying sweet corn from the grocery store where, as I said earlier, we're seeing SH2s more because they ship and they don't lose their sugars. And so they're used to that flavor. So what they expect from sweet corn is slightly different. And so therefore they want that flavor and they're looking for that flavor. It's probably also wrapped up in just the fact that not necessarily what they're wanting, but because the industry is largely grocery store focused nowadays, major chain grocery focused nowadays, that SH2 has become the norm.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting, because I think that I prefer SE, the sugary enhanced varieties, which is the like kind of older varieties that you thought the older crowd would like.
We're older, Andrew.
I'm 48, so I'm not on the younger side of things. And I remember trying the SH2 super sweets and thinking they were very sweet, but like there wasn't as much corn flavor. Yeah.
Yep. There is that too, right?
So I guess that's, in my mind, and that may have changed. I was more, like a decade ago or so, I was trying more things, partially because I was working at a seed company. So that was also fun. I got to try a lot of things. And so I thought that I liked the sugary enhanced for the, like balanced, I guess that was, you would say. I thought both had a lot of sweetness, but that the sugary enhanced were more balanced corn flavor. But they may be continuing to work on the flavor of the super sweets also. Yeah,
I would say that you should try some of the augmented super sweets. The AU ones are the ones that they've worked a lot on texture and depth of flavor. So it's not just like sweet. There's some really good flavor out there. I thought I was an SE person, but after getting into SH2s, I've been converted.
Okay. Well, honestly, if somebody offered me I wouldn't turn my nose up at any good sweet corn, right? Yeah. So, I guess it's if I wanted to be picky, and I may be wrong now. Like you said, the super sweets may have come along. Like this may be like a preference that I developed when super sweets were not. Super sweets may have made progress, and I usually plant varieties more based on what I think is going to ripen here. So, since we do have a very short season here in Maine, so. Maybe I'll try a really early super sweet this year. So I want to pick up on something you mentioned, the augmented varieties, because a newer development in sweet corn varieties, I guess there's 3 standalone varieties, and then the newer development is synergistic varieties, or I think you also called them augmented, that have some kernels that are super sweet and other kernels that are sugary enhanced. And does everybody like those because they're the best of both worlds?
Slight correction. The augmenteds are just super sweet kernels on the ear. The synergistics are a blend of the two. So if you're buying AU one, it's going to be all SH2 kernels. If you're buying an SYN synergistic variety, then it'll have a mix of SE and SH2 kernels on the same ear. So those are the best of both worlds. And as far as flavor goes, if you're stickler about those things, and they have because SH2s historically don't germinate well in cold soils, and SEs do germinate much better. SYNs, synergistics, even though they have a blend of the kernels, they will germinate almost or just as well as SE in colder soils.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for pointing that out. So augmented is a synonym with super sweet
It's a subcategory of the SH2 super sweets.
Oh, okay. And so synergistic, that makes sense because if synergy is two things working together, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
that makes sense. Synergistic is the ears that have both types of kernels on them. And so I've got a nerdy breeding question for you, or I guess seed production question for you. If they have ears, if they have both types of kernels on a single ear, does that mean that when they did the seed production that they used like the parent, they planted a row of the parent variety, and that the row of the parent variety was a mix of super sweet and sugary enhanced?
That makes sense to me, but I unfortunately don't know the answer to that question. I wish I did. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know all the ins and outs of breeding. I mean, I know, so like when they're doing, I've seen, just from being here in Iowa and osmosis and like observing like the seed corn production like fields, they will plant them next to each other, the two parent lines for this hybrid, and they will go through and mow off the tassels, the pollen producers, of the one that is going to be making the seed, and then leave the tassels for the one that is going to be the male pollinator. And then so yes, there are different parents for these. These are all F1s, but the synergistics are not genetically modified. They are not, bioengineered. This is traditional breeding that is making this synergistic. So it's got to be something in that whole process done that way. There's got to be SH2s, and I presume there has to be SH2 parentage and SE parentage in different ways.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Well, that's your homework for this season, Dan, is to find out how they actually make those and come back, and we'll talk about it next year. Because I was just thinking that over in my head. People may or may not know, the silks, correct me if I get any of this wrong, but the silks at the top of the corn are basically like a pollen tube. Each silk goes to one kernel.
Yes.
And so that's how you could naturally, like you said, without genetic modification or anything, that's how you could naturally get two different types of kernels on one ear. I was thinking you'd have to just make sure that there's a certain amount of pollen from both types, and some is going to land on one silk and make a super sweet kernel, and then some sugary enhanced is going to land on another silk and make a sugary enhanced. So that's how it's happening in my mind.
Yes. And that reminds me of, can I talk about one more pest that I neglected to talk about in the article that reminds me of?
Please do. That's why we're having the pod conversation.
Yeah. So Japanese beetles are a big pest of sweet corn. Also, their preferred food is the silk. And so they will eat all the silk off of the ear right down to the tip. And so that can, in a bad infestation, impact the pollination of that ear, and you could get poor tip fill, incomplete fill. And most times what I've seen in a bad infestation, the corn does marshal through it, they muster, they're able to make a good ear, but some growers do opt to spray for Japanese beetles to get rid of that risk. And these are conventional growers that I'm talking about. The organic growers are not spraying for the Japanese beetles. There's not that many options for those pests, and there's a large landscape full of more of them if you are somehow able to kill the ones that happen to be on your corn that one day.
Okay, yeah, thanks for mentioning that, because I have noticed Japanese beetles there at the tip eating the silks, I guess. Yeah, and if I can tell you a quick story about Japanese beetles, I feel like you mentioning that they're out there in the environment surrounding your corn or whatever you're growing, right? So for 1 year, I worked at the research farm of Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. In fact, I worked for a professor named Ron Morse, who people may know for researching no-till and organic vegetable production. And so the year that I worked there, he had some kind of a soybean trial going on. Honestly, I forget what we were actually researching about the soybeans, but people may have noticed that Japanese beetles also like soybeans. In fact, they told us, I'm not sure if this is correct, if we have any Japanese speakers in the audience who could verify this or not. The professor told me that in Japan, of course, they don't call them Japanese beetles. They call them soybean beetles. And I don't speak Japanese, so I can't verify that. But they sure did like the soybeans. And so I guess they were messing up our experiment. And so we were trying to sort of eliminate the Japanese beetles as a factor, confusing our research. And so they thought, well, they got those Japanese beetle traps, as you might see in sometimes in people's gardens, with a little yellow thing at the top and a bag on the bottom.
It's a pheromone trap, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So it's a yellow thing at the top with a pheromone in it, and man, it sure does draw them. Because I think I can't remember if we actually replaced the bags with trash bags or if we were just, I remember the smell or if it was just my job. One of my many jobs on that farm was to go empty the bags. And maybe it's just that we emptied the bags into trash bags. And so, we'd drive around the research farm with a pickup truck. And by the end of the run, we would have a couple trash bags full of Japanese beetles, which I remember the smell. So part of me bringing up this story was that we also had a lot of conversations about whether we were actually reducing any Japanese beetle pressure or whether we were just drawing more by like trapping the whole area and making the whole area smell like whatever Japanese beetle pheromones smell like. So I still don't know, but...
Well, our extension entomologist here, Donald Lewis, his take on it is that they do draw more than you would otherwise have. And his pithy recommendation to all growers is to buy the pheromone trap and then gift it to your neighbor.
That's probably a good strategy.
Questionable morality, but yeah.
All right, so you mentioned how the super sweets, the SH2 super sweets, are really what's being grown for grocery stores and shipping sweet corn. As long as you touched on post-harvest handling, I know in the past I heard that the sugars in sweet corn start breaking down almost as soon as you pick it. And I think that's especially true of the older varieties that aren't grown as much anymore. But I did hear that the newer varieties held better. Is that true? And are there any best practices for post-harvest handling beyond just getting it into cooling as quickly as possible, right? Because you figure it almost doesn't matter which variety you grew. Like, I guess if you are growing for shipping and you need it to hold, I guess super sweets would be the thing to do. But regardless of whatever variety you're growing, you want to just get them into cold storage as quickly as possible to preserve whatever sugar's there for as long as possible. Any other post-harvest tips for people?
That is the main one, is getting it cold quick. And you can do that either, through being cold in a cooler. Of course, if it's in a bin, that core of that bin is going to be hot for a lot longer. I know that when we were trying to cool things down at Featherstone and there was that question, we would sometimes put a harvest tote, like a handheld harvest tote, we'd put that upside down in the bottom of that big shuttle bin, and so there would be a core of air in the middle that could help to draw air into the middle of the bin. Of course, it held less, but it got it cooler faster. But ice would be another way to do it if you have an ice maker. But drawing, and then there's also, the University of Vermont's, ag engineering team who has put those plans out for the forced air cooler where you are drawing air through the bin. That would be another situation. But either way, it has to be in a cooler that has capacity for lots of cold air to get that stuff cooled down if you want to hold it. But most people, whether they're here in Iowa, whether they are selling SE, Synergistics, or Super Sweets, are picking every single day and selling it that exact same day, because that is what everybody's the quote unquote conventional wisdom is that, like you say, everybody knows sugars break down, because the conventional wisdom was developed when SUs were the norm. And it was true that 24 hours later, you would be eating something that tasted like field corn rather than sweet corn. But SEs give you 2 to 3 days of grace, Synergistics a couple days more, and Super Sweets 7 to 10 days. So that's a little bit of grace in picking if it's a bad weather day and you can't get out to harvest it, or it's also if you get it right at the peak of readiness and get it cooled down, that's some grace on the shipping side of it. So if you want to have a little bit more time, say you've got CSA boxes to pack, you pack them on a Thursday, but the corn is ready on Saturday because it's been hot and it developed faster than your plan was for it, then you could pick it early and on your schedule, on a day that made sense with your schedule, so that you could hold it and then put it in the box. Or it could be ready on that day and you wouldn't be out of luck because you could pick it on the CSA day and get it in that box on that same day.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point, is that the ability to hold is not just valuable for people who are shipping it a long way, because like you say, the CSA box are what about a farmer who has a market once a week? Because sweet corn does go by, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know, like how long of a period is. Like I just like my method. Actually, this is something I didn't even think to ask you. You can tell me if there's a better way to do it. Like I usually just kind of like go out and like feel the ears. Like when I'm trying to figure out whether pick them the first time, I just kind of like feel them to try to feel if the kernels. Like I feel like once they're approaching maturity, the kernels just become more distinct and more filled out, and then I'll start peeling back the tip, right? Because the tip is the last part to fill out. And so when I think I'm getting close to harvest, I'll peel back the tip and see if the kernels at the tip are filled out. And pretty well, I mean, it seems like when those tip kernels look filled out, it's probably time. So like I'll also go taste it, just to see. Is that a good way to know when they're ready? Okay, I mean, I was thinking like if for people with big fields, if it's, you got a block of one variety, if it's uniform, then you just have to figure out when it's starting to be ready, and then then it goes by. Like, is there any way to quantify how long sweet corn is at that peak before it's going to go by? Because I was thinking like, yeah, if you have a market once a week and you like, let's say a Saturday market or something, and you have, let's say it's hot and you have some sweet corn that's, let's say you picked it hard on Friday, but then there's corn that's ready to pick on Tuesday. Probably worth picking that and getting that in the cooler, because it might, so those sugars might start to convert to starches as it goes over mature, right? Okay, so.
Yeah, I mean, plants develop based on warmth, right? And so I think I misspoke earlier when I said you've got equal amounts of holding time, both post-harvest and harvest in the field. And because obviously if it's the middle of summer and you've got hot nights and that plant, and you have not harvested it, that plant's metabolic processes are going to go faster, and it's going to mature faster, and you're going to have less holding time than if you were to pick it at the first day of ripeness and then get it in the cooler. That's when you're going to have that 7 to 10 days. In the field, you've got a few days of grace, probably if it's super hot and you've got an SH2. If it's an SE, yeah, it's not necessarily 2 to 3 days in the field. So that's a really good point, Andrew. I'm glad you asked that clarifying question and made me think that assertion through a little bit more.
Yeah, okay, because the ability to hold it is going to come in handy for a lot of people.
Yes, and I would say like one error that I would often make when I was at Featherstone looking at the maturity of corn was going for it too early. Like I wanted early sweet corn, but you really do want to make sure that those kernels are really plumped up, not dented in the middle, but really plumped up fully. And there is probably a few days between when it's like tastes really good, but it's not quite fully filled out, and then the peak a few days later when it is really fully plumped up. And a person who is picking every day and does get a sense, you don't need to open up those tips and look at them. You can just sort of look at that ear or feel that with your hands and know that it's ready, and then be able to just harvest it.
Okay. As far as how to get a good stand of sweet corn, you talk about planting on bare ground, which is probably only feasible early for those using conventionally treated seed, planting through plastic, and transplanting. And another advantage of transplanting is that you could skip straight to the SH2 super sweet varieties if you prefer those. Like we talked about, those don't have the best cold soil germination. So you take that out of the equation by germinating them in a greenhouse or something and then transplanting them into the field. But back to our profitability tip, transplanting adds a lot of labor versus direct seeding. Do you know a lot of growers who are transplanting, and are there special considerations growers should have when transplanting sweet corn different from transplanting other crops?
Yeah. Most of the organic CSA and market farm growers that I know in the upper Midwest are transplanting, and some are transplanting every single succession of their corn.
Oh, wow.
And I know, well, it's a CSA and you want to have good stand. You've got limited space, and so you want to make sure you don't have any crop failures there. But when you're transplanting, you have to make sure that the plants are not getting pot bound in the trays. There is a big link to stunting and delays in maturity if they get pot bound. So you really just want to seed them, get them germinated, and then get them right out there into the field. So, because they're going to root up real fast. And we were doing 2 seeds in a 128 cell and planting it every, I can't remember exactly how much it was, 12 to 15 inches. Because, ideally, direct seeding, you're going to go every 8 or 9 inches. And you just want to make sure whatever trays you have, to just root them, fill out that cell, and get it right in the ground. And sometimes that means if you've got a bad weather week, and you can't get them out there, it's better to not plant those and just go with maybe the next succession a little early. So, or have a backup. If you want to plant every 2 weeks in the field, you plant every week in the greenhouse so that you have some flexibility. But of course, seeding labor is a cost. And so just don't worry about throwing out a tray or a succession every once in a while, because there's no guarantee that if you plant that, say 5 to 7 days later, that it will keep you on schedule. It might actually just bunch up with the next succession that you're planting that goes in at the right time.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and that's what I'd always been told, is that like almost like germinate them in the greenhouse and get them out. Like don't like you said, don't let them get root bound. So people, if they want to try that, just need to be aware and move them on really quickly after they germinate. That's mostly what we do, just because we have a very short season, and also because we're mostly just growing for ourselves. So we like to transplant.
But it's a lot of labor. And so I am trying, like one of the reasons I'm trying to find out when this inflection point is for success with organic seed treatments or success with raw seed is to get that information to growers out here so they can consider saving on that greenhouse and transplant labor and using their seeder instead to go and plant those things directly in bare soil, or if they've got a planter that plants into plastic mulch, plant the seeds rather than the other. So I think that around here in Iowa, I think that for organic growers, that time is around the beginning of May, maybe May 7th or something like that. But if you want to get that July 4th corn and you want early stuff, you got to plant it before that and likely transplant it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And row cover will help you with both keeping seed corn maggot off and generating some heat to get that crop developed and protected from the inevitable, frost nip.
Yes. And it's worth noting, you do talk more about using plastic and row covers and stuff like that in the article, so people can read more about that there. And do you have a sense of what price people are getting for sweet corn there in Iowa? And I'm assuming, like you said, it starts higher and then comes down over the course of the season. Do you have any idea what people are getting for sweet corn?
Yeah. And this is, we didn't talk about it in the profitability thing earlier, but I think people are wary of raising their prices, whether they are a roadside stand sweet corn vendor or a CSA farmer. But prices are going up everywhere, and I think that farmers are not seriously raising their prices or examining their costs and meeting the market prices well enough. The price here that I see a lot of times at roadside stands is 50 cents an ear, a dozen for $6. And some growers have raised that to $7 for a dozen, or they'll justify it by saying it's $7 and it's a baker's dozen. And I just think that especially if you're an organic grower and you're doing all the extra stuff, you need to charge more than that.
Yeah, that sounds low.
It is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. What's it go for out there?
I'm not sure. I've seen people selling sweet corn for $1 an ear, which sounds, and I think that was organic, and we definitely have a more adverse sweet corn environment than you do. And I thought, that's my gut feeling was that's probably what you need to be getting to make any kind of profit on it, especially if you're organic.
Yes, my gut also is that about $1 an ear sounds right.
Well, Dan, those are really the questions that I had for you about sweet corn. I want to make sure and talk a little bit more about pivot points, but maybe before we pivot, is there anything else you want to say about sweet corn before we go to other stuff?
No, I think we got it.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think your article was really good. If people want to go detail by detail, they can go read the article. I feel like this podcast was a good opportunity to talk about some of the stuff that might be a little bit more speculative, like, are people even making money on it?
Yes, I know, right?
So, okay, great. We could leave it there. I just thought we should tie up sweet corn before we move on to other stuff. I appreciate that. But I did want to make sure and talk a little bit more about your podcast called Pivot Points. So one of your podcasts that is called Pivot Points.
Yes.
And your co-host Sarah Jane Egeretz has written for the magazine before, and you two have the article in the current magazine, which actually could be a nice entry point for people into the podcast, since it is kind of like a summary of some of the takeaways from the first season of that podcast. So I just wanted to ask, how did you decide to start a podcast with Sarah, and how did you choose that as your theme?
Sure. Well, Sarah and I have worked for several years on coordinating the Organic Vegetable Production Conference in Madison that just happened last weekend. So it's at the end of January or beginning of February every spring. And so we had worked together and had a good working relationship. And so when I had this idea, which started, when it's sort of been going through the back of my mind every winter when I would see on farmer listservs, well-respected farmer sending out an announcement about the farm auction. They're closing a shop, selling off all the tooling and things that they have accumulated over the years. And I would think two things. One, gosh, sad that somebody couldn't just step into that operation when they're done, and that all this wisdom and knowledge and farm systems that have been accumulated over the years are just being pieced out. PIECED, pieced out across the region, both that and then, gosh, more of an emotional level. If they can't make it, how am I ever going to make it? And like speculation about that it just wasn't profitable. And I wanted to have a podcast where we did exit interviews with these farmers who were leaving the industry. And I called Sarah with that idea. She was excited about it. And in developing a script and more of a list of growers who we wanted to talk to, we realized that the podcast would actually be better if it was expanded to, or it'd be more universally relatable if we expanded it to just big changes that people go through. And since then, we've heard some growers say, every year is a transition year for us. No year is the same, and we're always changing things up. And so we found a great reaction to folks, hearing these stories about changes that people have gone through. And yes, we do have exit interviews with farmers who have left farming. And we also have interviews with folks who have just changed up their business plan, whether it was from CSA to switching to online sales or something like that. So it's all sorts of different conversations. And we recorded and released season 1 last September, and we are currently recording episodes for season 2 at the moment with a new round of farmers. And it seemed like one of the big lessons or takeaways, unanswered questions, area that we kind of didn't focus on enough last season was how are people stepping into established farms and making it work for them, and also just land access in general. And so we're looking at that a lot more in our interviews this season with growers, in addition to other things.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I think that's a really good idea, because I think you kind of said this, but farming kind of is pivoting a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And what I mean, there's just the vagaries of the weather and pests and diseases in a given year. It's, in a way, that's what keeps agriculture interesting for me, is that it's always changing, but it also can be interesting, as in frustrating. So, and I think even more so in the time that we're living in. Think about the last few years. So we went through COVID, an enormous pandemic pivot point that encouraged a lot of people to go, get some kind of online sales platform, right? I feel like that was a huge evolution point, because I think most people who got an online sales platform during COVID probably still have it, right? That was the change point, that kind of enforced itself over the whole world, and had changes, and then climate change is playing out. It's the biggest thing I'm noticing is our weather is just erratic. It's generally warmer, yes, but more than anything, it's just very hard to plan now, because sometimes we're having early dry springs, sometimes we're having late wet springs. It makes me realize how much I took regular weather for granted back when it was more predictable. So yeah, I think that's a great topic, because even in the best of times, farming, I think, involves a lot of rolling with punches and pivoting. And I think we've got even more of that. And, a lot of people had government grants either go away or, change on them. There's there's been a lot of pivot points here recently. So I'm thinking that's a great topic and that you'll have a target-rich environment. I'm thinking you're probably not having trouble finding guests to talk about pivoting and farming.
We are not. It is a big thing. And we feel like bringing these conversations, these stories out into the open is just really normalizing it and helping people realize that they're not alone with feeling overwhelmed by these things, that it is normal, and giving sort of a template, an idea maybe of a way that they hadn't considered otherwise. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really enjoyed the summaries that were in your article, Pivot Points, that is in the current magazine. And I think it can be really helpful for growers because you're right. It's like at Growing for Market, we're trying to give growers resources, right, to run the best farm business that they possibly can. And I'm sure that's probably largely how you think about what you do. But then there's always challenges in running a business of like, okay, we hit this challenge. Can we get over it? How do we get over it? And then there's the thing that I think people talk about less that you're talking about is how do you decide when it's time? How much debt do you go into before you call it off? You know, there's some people have health challenges. I mean, there's so many reasons why people might decide to wind down the farm. And yes, I think even if that's not what people go to, it's helpful to hear from these examples to see how other people either decided, were able to persist or decided not to. So I think it's a great topic and I'm glad you're doing it. Do you know when the next season is coming out?
Yeah, it's likely going to be late summer 2026, maybe even September. We record in the winter and then we sort of edit as we have time. And then last year, it took us until September to really get our act together to get it all done. But this year, it might come out earlier, but maybe we're wondering also if September might be the best because we drop it all like in a discrete season. So it was like 6 weeks, one episode each week. And we felt like we got good listenership in September because the peak of summer is over. People can sort of like take a breath and focus on something else. And I don't know if growers have a different opinion and they want it earlier, let us know. But we might just wait till then because we feel like people can have capacity to add something back into their life at that point because August is over.
Yeah. Or they could just wait a few weeks and binge the whole season in the tractor while they're doing like their fall cultivation or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody's different. This is a big thing. Like everybody's different. Success is different for everybody.
Yeah. Well, Dan, that's what I had for you as far as questions. Is there anything else that I should have asked you or that you'd like to say before we let you go?
No, nothing else that you should ask me, I don't think. I'm just so grateful for Growing for Market. When I was a grower, it helped me throughout the years with finding new ideas and ways to do things. It's been a really guiding light for me as a grower. And then the whole idea of farmer to farmer education is one that I still believe a lot in and I try to bring into the extension work that I do. So yeah, thanks for all you do, Andrew.
Oh, thanks so much. Growing for Market is something that most of the farmers that we worked for got. And so that's how we got introduced to it. And so we're just trying to, it helped us out a lot when we were getting started. So we're just trying to keep it going. So thanks. And well, this has been really fun. I feel almost like we were at a conference and just had lunch, but, got the extended break. Cause a lot of the lunch is such a great time at conference. I feel like some of the best things that have ever happened to me at conferences have come over the lunch table, but then it's always kind of has a time limit. So I feel like today, we got to dig in. We had a lunchtime conversation, but we had a very long lunch. We got to dig in. So it's not a tiny mic interview. It's a long lunch interview.
Yes, indeed.
But I really enjoyed it. I do hope that we end up at the same conference someday. It would be fun to meet you in person and do a tiny mic interview.
Yes, please. Love it. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, I actually just started going back to conferences for GFM when I was at the ASCFG conference last week of flower growers, which was really excellent. So maybe I came back from that just with good vibes only. It reminded me why we do things. Actually, everything's so digital these days. It made me realize it's almost more important maybe to show up in person. And so
Yes.
that actually whetted my appetite. I'm looking forward to doing some more conferences next year. So hopefully our paths can cross and we can do a Tiny Mike interview.
Yeah. And am I right that 2026, this fall, is when the Northeast Veg Conference is happening?
I think I think it is a Northeast Veg Conference year. You're right. It's a biennial. So I think it's this year.
I need to make it out to that conference one of these years. I hear such good things, and
Yeah.
maybe that'll be where.
I should probably be there since it's pretty, I'm here in Maine and it's down in New Hampshire. It's pretty much in my backyard. So, all right. Yeah. Come up to New England. We'll hang out. That would be fun.
Awesome.
But I really do appreciate you sharing both your knowledge about sweet corn and all the other stuff with the pivot points and everything. But I do want to make sure and give you a chance to let people know where they can find you online, social media, so they can find your Tiny Mike interviews. And you can tell people wherever you want people to look you up. So where is that?
Yeah, sure. So on Instagram, I'm at Iowa Veg Pro Support, and all those little words have a period in between them. It's so cumbersome. I wish I had made a different name at some point, but oh well, I'm sticking with it at this point. If you want to go to find me on like my newsletter that I do on the web, rather than joining my newsletter listserv, it's extension.iastate.edu/commercialhort. That's where you can find that information. And yeah, the podcast's Pivot Points, What in the Weather, and on YouTube at ISU Extension Hort. And I've got, like I said, I'll be trying to put my reels up on shorts there. And then we've got some recordings of past conference sessions on there as well that you can check out. So yeah, look me up.
Okay. I hope people will. You got a lot of great resources there, Dan, and you do a lot of really good work to help growers. And so thank you for that. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. And, don't be a stranger. Keep us in mind for articles, or if there's another topic you want to talk about on the podcast some other time, would love to have you back sometime.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Andrew.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or a review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine for a month, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never even get billed. All subscriptions get you a year of the magazine, plus 150 downloadable back issues from the last 15 years and over 1,700 archived articles. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 a year, head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers, for farmers, in Growing for Market magazine.